October 11th, 1987, 19 boats were lined up side by side on Loch Ness in Scotland. They set out across the lake, and each one of those boats was equipped with a graphing fish finder, very similar to this one right here. They like those graphing fish finders since it's just recently been invented, and they also would show you a permanent record of what they saw on the screen. In the 20th boat, bringing up the rear, was the leader of the expedition. His name was Lowrance. Yep, the same Lowrance family that invented the little green box. In fact, Daryl was the one who pretty much came up with the idea. Hey folks, and welcome to the shop. My name's Sean, and this is a series where we just sit out here in the shop and talk about stuff I've collected over the years, and I've got a whole lot of stuff, and most of it ain't worth much. And I'm not an expert on anything, but I do like to read as much as I can about the stuff I've held on to through my, I hate to say it, but 60 plus years of fishing. Including the original little green box that my father owned. He was an early adopter. He bought it in 1964. But that the Lowrance family, Carl Lowrance and Daryl's brother Arian, came up with the idea after Daryl had flown across the Lake of the Cherokees in Oklahoma. And it was a clear day with clear water, and he could look down from his airplane and see schools of fish. Now, he was an avid fisherman, and he knew he couldn't see those schools of fish when he was in his boat, no matter how clear the water was. So he had the idea of using this newfangled sonar technology that the Navy had come out with for finding fish. Now, he wasn't the first person that come up with using sonar waves or coming up with, different kinds of things to see what was in the water. There was a couple of brothers over in Japan, the Furuno brothers. You've heard of Furuno, right? The Furuno brothers had come up with a system of actually shooting bubbles into the water, and you could tell how deep it was, and you could tell if there's something between you and the bottom. But the Lowrances used sound waves, and it was a good idea. So in the mid-1950s, they come up with the idea. By 57, they had a prototype, and by the early 1960s, about 1962, they were mass producing them and advertise them. They cost $124.50. Now, $124.50, you put that into an inflation calculator these days, that's about $1,300 in today's money. So they weren't cheap, but they were revolutionary, and they sold about $1 million a year. Fishermen really liked them. And the first ones, the very earliest first ones, they weren't even green. They were red. So if you ever come across a little red box, a red fish locator, that's one of the ones produced in the first couple of years, and they're very valuable. They sell for $300 or more. So hold on to it if you get one, but the green ones aren't worth that much. You can buy them for $20, $30 all day long. You can get one that works for $50, and a lot of people still use them. They like them for ice fishing. In fact, when I first moved up to the Chesapeake Bay 18 years ago, I had an old Sea Ray Express cruiser, and that thing had a flasher built in on the dash, and I used it to locate rockfish and didn't have any trouble at all finding rockfish. So the way those early the way every sonar works is it sends sound waves down into the water. So it sends them down pretty fast, and as those sound waves go down, hit the bottom, bounce back, and come back up to the transducer. The transducer both sends and receives the sound waves and then transmits it by a cable to a screen, or in the early days into the dial on those flashers. And so the earliest, the original little green box transmitted at 192 kilohertz. Now a hertz is 1 cycle per second. A kilohertz is 1,000 cycles per second. So 192 kilohertz, that's 192,000 sound waves per second that little green box is putting in the water. So that's a lot. And we hadn't changed too much on that frequency. Now, today's modern fish finders, a lot of them transmit at 2,000 cycles, kilohertz, 2,000 kilohertz. And some of them slower. The slower the sound waves go in, the deeper they'll penetrate, but you get less resolution. You don't get the good returns, but you do get deeper and you get a more narrow cone. So there's a value to that too, and sometimes you would rather have that, but you typically, the faster the frequency, the more you see, and then the more detail that you'll receive. So let me show you a little bit about how this thing works. So the fish locator, here's the transducer right here. It had this nice little carrying case. There's a battery back under here, and so when you turned it on and you had a gain over here, you'd adjust the gain so that you could see a solid flash, and that would have been orange. There'd be a solid orange flash up here. That was the surface. And then over around here, however deep your water was, say it was 25 feet right there, there'd be another flash. If you had your gain up too high, you might see the other flashes over here too, where it's echoes, where it's coming back around again. But most of the time, that's the way it would work. Now, it would send those frequencies at 192 thousandths per second, and via a ping. So every ping was not just 192,000 waves at that point. It was more. It would do even more with a ping, and the faster you pings, the even more waves you get going down in there. But anyway, so at the bottom down here, say you had a flash down here, you could tell the density of the bottom by the width of this signal down here. If it was real wide, if say it was coming up like that, you had a mud bottom. If it was real narrow, those sound waves were bouncing back faster, and so it was a solid bottom. If there was grass or something on the bottom, you'd see little flicks up here. If you ran over a tree or some stumps or a rock or something, you'd see those show up a little bit off the bottom. And we'd get real good at it. You could tell the difference in a tree and a stump, no problem at all. Rocks, yeah, you know what rocks were. You absolutely knew what they were. But anything that showed up between the surface and here, that might have been fish. Or it could have been leaves or something too, but most of the time we're looking for fish, right? So sometimes you could see bait, and bait would show up as little real fast flicks, little flickers here and there. There's a school of bait, and then the fish would show up a little bit more solid returns. And you can tell the difference in a bass and a rockfish, and you can definitely tell the difference in a school of crappie or school of bluegill or something, and bigger fish. And so, like I say, we got good at it. So, the next logical advance was going to these graphing fish finders. Let's see if I can open this up and show you how it works. So there would have been a belt right here, and that belt actually drove this. Is like a scroll, and it would scroll across here, and there's the paper right back there. And so you had, it shows you paper diagram, shows you how to load that paper. You had to put ink in it too. Now, first one, when I first got mine, I couldn't afford no paper. I had a poor East Tennessee boy, and somebody gave me this graphing fish finder, and I figured out that you can take that paper out and turn it around, roll it back through again. And this time you put it on the back. Or sometimes, if you didn't have a whole lot on the screen, you just record over it, and you can still kind of tell what was going on. So here's what the surface looks like right here, and here's the bottom. This line down here, if you looked at modern day fish finders, looks just like your LED screen, except this is scrolling across on paper. Ain't much to it. It's pretty common. So that's how they worked, and I got some more over here. I've kept every fish finder I've ever owned, and I need to upgrade again. It's way past time, but they've got some pretty interesting ones these days. I mean, the technology has advanced so much. We got to side scan. That was a Lowrance invention, but some of the other companies have picked it up and perfected it, and not that Lowrance isn't good; they're still good too. But some of this newer technology, a live scope, oh my goodness, you can see the fish actually swimming around and come up to your bait, and you almost know when to set the hook. And there's a lot of controversy, especially in the professional bass fishing world right now, about if that's fair or not. Well, I remember back in 1964 when my dad first got his, and I remember it distinctly because it was so interesting. We knew that it was going to revolutionize fishing, but people said we was cheating, even at that time. But that's what we do as fishermen. We're always going to be advancing the technology and doing everything we can to try to outsmart those fish, and somehow or another they just keep outsmarting us. That's just kind of the way it works. Back to Loch Ness. 19 boats went across the lake. And it's a deep lake. I think it's 700 feet. They got about 2/3 of the way across. 600 feet, they started seeing a signal. They saw 3 signals. First one Lowrance said might have been a seal. I don't know about that. I don't know. I didn't know they had seals in middle of Scotland. Maybe they do. Maybe they can get in there. 600 feet seems pretty deep for a seal to me. And then he saw 2 more returns, and they have them on. They had them on a graph so everybody could look at them. And the press was all there. They all wanted to see it. There was a helicopter. Everybody come out to see this. And they had some returns, and Daryl said that they were bigger than a shark because he'd deep sea fished before and shark fished, and he knew what they looked like on his fish finders. He said that it was bigger than a shark but smaller than a whale. Was it the Loch Ness monster? Well, nobody knows. It just actually ended up adding to the mystery, and I believe it's still a mystery to this day. I don't know if there's a Loch Ness monster or not, but you kind of hope they would be. But that's the story, and I will talk more about fish finders sometime, I hope. But thank you for coming out today and listening to my shop story. If you hadn't subscribed yet, I hope you will. Your likes are very much appreciated, and shares, and if you got any questions, hey, send them my way. I really appreciate it. The whole purpose of this series is if you don't know where you've been, it's harder to see where you're going. So that's what it's all about. Let's talk about where we've been, and then we'll talk about where we're going and how the new technology and the new fishing lures and new rods and reels and all that stuff will apply to our fishing. Well, happy fishing, and I hope you'll tune in next time.